I was looking for someone to talk about the unhealthy divide in our country, and I don't think I could have found a better person. My guest this hour is Jonathan Torosian. He is the host of a phenomenal podcast called The New Liberals. Its tagline is Liberal Conversations for Illiberal Times. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Charles. I love that intro.
The music or me pumping you up?
I just realized that. The tagline over the music, but I also don't mind your intro of me.
Good. I love it. So let's start with, I guess the best place to start is, what is a new liberal?
Sure. So I think the best way to describe it is by going to the show's tagline, which is at the end, right? So every show, we end with the phrase, may we be liberal in our goodwill, liberal in our capacity for friendly disagreement, and liberal in our willingness to change our minds when we feel justly convinced. And I think that that's so key. And having listened to your show for a while now, one of the things that I really enjoy about your show is that it is liberal in its intent, which is liberalism is an ability to talk with someone else, even if they come from a background different from yours or hold views different from your own, without resorting to things like name calling or violence. I think those are the fundamental aspects of a liberal society and something that I'm trying to do with the show.
Right, that's good. So I guess the illiberal times, the illiberal is the opposite, right? It's those who cannot connect in a very humane way and speak with people without doing all those things, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's an upcoming episode of the show on Tuesday with a filmmaker and writer by the name of Jay Shapiro. And on that show, we talk a lot about what it means to be a liberal, what it means to be a conservative, where the party's at in the 21st century, because they've changed quite a bit over the last couple decades. I think you and I would both agree on that point. And my point in that show is that you can be on the right or the left and be small L liberal, because liberalism, again, is not necessarily a set of beliefs. It's an ability to function with your fellow man and woman in a diverse society like ours.
100%. And I think too many people have lost that. It used to be the norm. And then 4 to 5 years ago, people started to say, well, I'm a classical liberal. Remember, it was like, well, let me be clear of what this means. And now I think that's even lost some of its luster. We have to come up with a new term, kind of like you did. But I guess next, I kind of want to know why. I tried to find, so I listened to the show. I'm going to get into some more details about some of the things you do, because it's a phenomenal show. Trust me, I'm not saying that because he's here, but I don't know much about you except for the little drops you put into the show. So I want to know not so much your personal background, but, not that far back, but what brought you to do the podcast? What, made you feel that it was a space for it and we needed it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I can start with what is known in the film industry, which is where I work, as the inciting incident, right? The inciting incident in a screenplay would be the moment when everything changes for the protagonist, right? Usually if you're watching a film, it happens somewhere around the 15 or 20 minute mark. Marty McFly realizes that he has to go back in time or he realizes he has to fix the past because his family is disappearing. That's an inciting incident, right? So the inciting incident for me, which eventually led to the podcast, was probably election night 2016. Now, there's this bar in Los Angeles where I live where I went to watch Obama defeat Mitt Romney in 2012, and it's on 3rd Street near La Cienega. None of your viewers are going to know where that is, but it's kind of central Los Angeles, okay? And the bar in 2012 was packed. Standing room only, plasma screen TVs everywhere, perfect place to watch an election roll in. And of course, it's Los Angeles, so everyone was cheering for President Obama at the time. And it was great. If you were a fan of Obama and if you voted for him, it was a raucous, joyous place to be, right? And so 2016 comes around. I suggest to a few friends, hey, let's go to the same bar. It'll be great. We can go to the same bar. It'll be packed. I mean, none of us were that enthused about Hillary, but we weren't really fans of Donald Trump because of all the news we'd been reading. And so I take them to this bar, and it's about 6:30, 6:45. Now, around that same time, 4 years prior, 100 plus people in the bar. This time, we're 4 of 12 people. It never gets more busy than that. So as the results start coming in and it becomes more and more clear that Donald Trump was going to win, I started getting angry, not at Donald Trump and not at his voters, who I had been kind of angry at for a while leading up to that, because all of my news sources were places like The Atlantic, The New York Times, Washington Post, Slate, Salon. And when the results started coming in, I started getting angry, not with Donald Trump or his voters, but with the media, because I felt like they had led me astray. In that, how could they have been so wrong? How could they have said, it's not just that Hillary Clinton's going to win, Charles. It's how big of a landslide is her win going to be. And I had bought that like whole cloth. And so in the following year, I started diversifying my news sources. And again, I want to be clear here. This isn't like, I'm not dunking on liberal news. I think both sides do have their biases, which is why I think having a diverse media diet is important. But that was sort of the lesson for me in realizing that I had to look outside of my bubble, so to speak, in order to get a bigger picture. And it doesn't mean that necessarily all my views have changed. Some have definitely changed a little bit, and I've seen more nuance to different points of view. But I think that was sort of the waking up point for me when I realized if all you do is talk to the same people and read the same news stories and listen to the same pundits over and over and over again, you're going to get a skewed view of the world. And so in the following years, when I would try to talk with some of my friends about topics with a little more nuance, whether it's issues of Antifa or the Covington Catholic thing, or Jussie Smollett, or take any number of issues that were coming up on the news, and I tried to talk about it with a little more nuance, my friends would often just parrot back to me the things that they had read in the exact same news sources that told me in 2016 that Hillary Clinton was going to blow it out. And so I began to get really hungry for having conversations that were not just diverse in terms of who I was talking with, but in our ability to talk about conversations in a more nuanced way, and not, whatever side of the aisle we're on, right or left, not just parrot the things that are being told to us by the news organizations that we consume, but rather to think about issues from all sides of it in a quest for the truth, rather than a quest for being right. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. It's to your credit to do so, and without losing yourself. It seems that, in your opinion, you better than anyone else, that you didn't make some drastic shift or become someone else. You just said that I would say I could have sat back here for the next 10 minutes, unless you go longer in that list where you went through Salon and everything else about the media and how wrong they were. And we'll get into that later. And like you say, it's not, that it only happens. So I have a lot of conversations with my liberal friends, and we'll get to some of those differences. Like I talk a little bit more about my views than you do on the show. So it's kind of obvious what they are. But at the same time, I kind of bristle when I hear both sides, and, we'll have more time to talk about that on the other sides. And it's not that they're wrong. So I agree with I have conversations with my liberal friends and a couple that are more left about the both sides thing. And I say you're 100% right. Most conservatives wouldn't give you that. You're right. The difference is who's saying the both sides, right? And with some exception, a lot of times it tends to be, major news outlets, major papers, people with huge circulation, other than talk radio. A little bit different now, but, for the last 5 to 6 years, them versus some guy in his basement, right? Or somebody who has a very small platform and, things of that nature. So it's not even that I'm saying it's more people on the left making this noise than there are on the right. I'm saying they're different people with different, from different industries, with different backgrounds, different points of influence, and they converge, creating this giant snowball. Because you talk about 2016, like you said, it's not that, everybody must remember, it's not that they said Hillary was going to win and it was going to be close and then Trump wins. You're like, oh, they were wrong. I thought it was going to. They said that morning, I think they said, what did they say? She had I want to say 94% chance of winning the morning of. Yeah. So you like you say, you took the right response. You didn't get mad at the Trump or at the voters. You get mad because how could they be so wrong? It's not just that it's media and it's people all have an opinion, because that's fine. It's people who do this for a living that, posters, putting themselves, you would think, theoretically out of business by being wrong in polling, which is what they do. So it means that even their line of questioning might have been flawed. They took their bias into that. So, when we get a chance, I guess we only got 30 seconds. So I will set up what I want to go to next. I want to talk about, let you respond to that, but talk about, get into what these both sides, means, what the average person on the left and the person on the right says and does, and how that leads to us being polarized. More with Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
We return to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer. Once again, here's Charles Love.
Are you tired of summer nights in Maine? Do you
Welcome back. We are talking with Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. When we left, I was addressing the both sides narrative, and before I go on, I'd like to give Jonathan a chance to reply.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, and we hear both sides a lot, right? And so I think that the issue is that, yes, both sides come at a given issue or a story or a media tidbit, right, from both sides of the aisle, in terms of they'll have their own perspectives that they come with kind of preloaded. Right. And to some extent that's fine, right? We all have our ideologies, we all have our points of view, but I think it's just we need to strive for being more charitable in how we perceive the other side. And that's why I think it's important to have these kinds of cross-aisle conversations like the ones we're having now, because it's better to hear from the other person what they believe with their own words rather than hearing what a pundit says that the other side believes. Because the pundit, you know, and I'm speaking for both sides here, they're chasing media dollars, they're chasing advertising, and they're incentivized to tell you things about the other side that are more caricatures than truth. And I think that's the most important thing. If you have a liberal coworker or a conservative friend, a liberal or conservative family member, talk with them about why they're interested in things like climate change or gun rights or abortion, any number of issues. Ask them, why do you feel the ways that you do about the things that you care about, rather than assuming that, oh, this person must care deeply about this thing because they're a bigot or because they're a neo-Marxist. I mean, of course, there are going to be people on both sides, at the very fringes, right, that have hate in their hearts, that want to dominate over other people. But those are the rare exception. Most people, and this is why I think that the media is often derelict in its duty in terms of reporting issues, most people don't have time to play little reporter for like 8 hours a day so they can make sure that they investigate every side of a story. They have families to take care of. They have mouths to feed. They have interests of their own. And so they look to the media to tell them what is true. But oftentimes the media does no such thing. So it's unfortunate, but it means that all of us can kind of take that on ourselves, even in small ways, and reaching out to someone who we know is different from us in terms of their ideology and asking them, why do you think the way that you think about the things you care about?
That's 100% true. What he's really saying is you need to listen to his podcast and this show and others like it. Because if you think about it, but no, because it's really true. It's not, because here's the thing, not just because of what the pundits do, what people don't understand. You said something key there, right? You say that people won't listen, don't have time to listen to the whole thing or watch a whole show or spend 8 hours doing this. Or they read headlines, clickbait as they call it, and they don't read the whole article. Yeah. Well, they have to understand, Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow, I don't care which side you're on, they get paid to do that for a living. So they get to eat, sleep, and drink it. People like Jonathan and Charles have jobs and lives and other things, and we do this on top of what we do, right? We don't do this as, this is what I do 52 hours a week, and I got time to dig into all this and read everybody's, bios and read every article and all this stuff. You do it because we know that there needs to be another approach. And I say that all the time. I when I talk to my friends who may not have the same political views as me, I approach it from a standpoint, I'm not trying to get you to agree with me. I just want you to understand me. And what I yell at Republicans about, I have been for over a decade, and they don't listen because they just don't get it. I said, forget about converting. The problem, the reason you have, there's other issues, but the main reason you have problems with minorities is because you allow your quote unquote political opponent to dictate what you believe. So you never come around. I never hear from a Republican. So I only hear what Republicans believe from Democrats. Of course, they're going to paint you as evil. Of course, they're going to paint you as wrong, or whatever the case may be. That's your fault for not getting in there and saying what you believe. And the last thing I want to say about the other side is yet another testament I want to give to you. I listened to your show. I've listened to at least 5 of the podcasts completely full. And you talk about talking to the other side. I don't know your side. So you got me beat there. People can listen to my side and say, at least I'm fair, but they know what I believe. I have no idea what your side is because you don't approach the issue that way. And in some instances, you make it a point. One of the funniest is, I love Will Riley. We're both part of 1776. He's been on the show twice. And you took the Steelman argument when you interviewed him. It was like, I'm not even me when I do this interview with you, which was both interesting and made for a pretty awesome interview. So I want to say that your approach is great, but what is your side? Let's see if we can get you to say.
Well, I think the reason that I don't talk about my own side on the show that much is because the focus of the show really is dialogue and really is talking with the other person and hearing them the way that they want to talk and be heard, right? So the most recent episode, and trust me, I'm not dodging your question, but as a point, the most recent episode I did with a wonderful guy by the name of Will Robinson, who's from the American Conservation Coalition, a conservative organization that's interested in climate change and wants to get young people and people in general on the right side of the aisle excited about this issue in ways that go further than just, say, the Green New Deal. They want to give alternatives to that framework. But I wanted to speak with him and hear what he had to say rather than trying to just necessarily impose my own views onto him, which I think happens too often. In terms of my own views, I mean, I'm not that ideological. I would say that I'm center-left. I went through a libertarian phase in like the late 2000s. I was all Ron Paul. That was more of a reaction to my religious upbringing. I consider myself agnostic now, but my libertarian streak was kind of a result of losing my faith as a younger person and then kind of railing against what I saw as any kind of authority. You know, the state I kind of saw through the lens of religion. But in terms of now, I mean, the most important things to me really do come down to a lot of the things that are important in, let's say, classical liberalism, which is I want you to be able to live your life as full as you can and as happy as you can as you see it. And I want that same courtesy extended to me. Now, of course, some of that gets messy when we talk about other things like the death penalty and that sort of thing, which I'm personally against. But when it comes to a lot of issues, I mean, had you talked to me 5 years ago, Charles, I probably would have been a lot more hardcore in some of my beliefs, but I'm just kind of worn out. And what I mean by that is like, there are a couple things that I'm very much like kind of hardcore about in terms of, I think that, what was that proposition that happened here in California? Prop 16, I think it was. Oh,
yeah, the affirmative action, the race-based thing.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I pretty much went out to vote explicitly no against that. And the thing is, in that I didn't want it repealed. What had been passed in the late 90s, I didn't want repealed. Yeah. And even then, it's difficult to have conversations with people on the left about that because their immediate assumption is then, oh, well, you just don't want people of color to do well, which is, of course, not the case at all. It's just that I have a diverse friend set here in Los Angeles, for instance, let's say. And they, oftentimes, and I'm sure you may have experienced this in your own life, there's always that, for some of them, there's going to be that thing that's haunting them in the back of their mind, which is understandable in a diverse society to some extent, which is, did I get to where I was because of my own merit and the hard work that I put in? Or did I get to where I was because someone thought I would be good for the brochure? Or I would be, I would help, their diversity numbers when they go on the stock call in 6 months? Am I here because I'm me, or am I here because of what I represent to the people who hired me? And if you've ever, and I think that what I'm about to say next is really kind of the fruit of the show, like that, this is really like an intrinsic element of what the show is about, is no one should ever be judged for something that they cannot change. I think that that's one of the worst things that you can do to a person. Judging someone by the color of their skin or the sex they were born into or their orientation or whatever it is, something that is beyond your control, being judged for something like that, that you can't control, that isn't really a part of who you are in terms of your interests and the things that you like and the people that you love and the topics that you were really fascinated about. Those are what make you you. And so for me, that's one of the most important things about the show. And I know you've listened to a bit of it. That's why I have so many guests on to talk about things like identity. And so that's more what is really kind of driving me. When it comes to other topics, I mean, I have my ideas, but I'd love to have guests on who could potentially change my mind because my ideas are not me. I'm me. So if my ideas change, I don't change. I'm still me. And I wish a lot of people would look at it more that way, that you are not your ideas. Ideas are things you can hold or let go of, and it doesn't make you any less you.
Well, that's well put. And I think that the problem tends to be, I mean, you said it great. You said you are not, you're you, but people want to peg you as something based on your belief on any one particular issue. And things just don't work that way. You are more than just against the death penalty, for instance, since you mentioned that one. There's more to you than just that, and we get lumped into those things. But we're going to go further. More with Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. We are talking to Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. And I want to talk about the issues that divide us. Jonathan, your show description also says, when the tenets of a free society are under threat from right and left, liberalism isn't classical, it's radically new. So what are the primary ways each side is threatening the free society, and are the threats of one more aggressive or dangerous than the other?
That's a great question. I think that both threats are unique in their own way, and I think they both manifest themselves in different ways. I think when it comes to issues of the left, I think that the kind of monocultural media lens can be really, to use a rather new phrase, problematic. And the reason I think that is it leads to scenarios in which people on the right feel marginalized, to use another popular word. But I think that it's true, right? There was something that I had a little discussion on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and I said that, like, imagine a world, right? And hard to imagine, I think, for a lot of conservatives, but imagine a world in which half of the late night hosts on major television are on the right, right? Somewhere on the right, either they're center right or further to the right, wherever on the spectrum. Imagine that half of all shows that are on major networks, half of all shows that are on HBO and Showtime, half of all the media that you consume is geared towards people who identify as conservative. If half of all mainstream media were that way and had been that way for 50 or 60 or 70 years, do I think a lot of the problems on the right that are beginning to kind of rear themselves would exist? I don't think so. So I think that the left and the right are kind of in this back and forth where the left is shutting the right out of a lot of mainstream media narratives, and people on the right aren't really hearing their own voices repeated back to them and their views spoken back to them in ways that are steel men rather than straw men. Mm-hmm. And so then I think that can lead to a lot of people on the right feeling not heard, feeling desperate, which I think can lead to acts of violence and other things, and which of course happens on the left as well. I find myself having to make sure that I'm being fair to both sides here, but I think that they're kind of in this constant struggle of the right says that the left does this, which is partially true, and the left says that the right does this, which is partially true. But I just wish that we lived in a society in which both sides, instead of just all the right-wing people being on talk radio and YouTube, also had a voice somewhere else. And I also, if I'm being honest, I wish there were more left-wing hosts on radio so that people who were driving their cars could hear the other side. I know I sound like a broken record here, but I do really think that it comes down to messaging and people feeling left out of the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that the radio thing, because they tried the Air America thing, and there's a few people out there, right. Stephanie Miller and other. I think it's not conservatives try to say because nobody wants to listen to that crap. No, that's not true. You got to be honest. The reason it doesn't work is because there's so much everywhere else, so they don't need it, right? But if they needed it, there would be a great market for it, without a doubt. Right. And I think you're right. I think that in this thing. Well, let me ask you this. I think in the real world that people, or at least they were before the last year, that people were less combative and polarized. So I want to know if you agree with that. And if so, what do you contribute the rising polarization to? Let's start there.
Sure. I think that the polarization that we're experiencing has been on the rise probably for the last 30 to 40 years. I think some of that is the age of the internet. I think that it's easier than ever to be in our echo chambers and to only get fed news that we agree with. And I think that is a human phenomenon, right? Like, we like being told that we're right, because the more that we're told that we're right, the better we feel about ourselves and the better we feel about the world. The world feels less chaotic if the way that we view the world and the way that our friends and family view the world, we're all correct, and the other side is just evil. Man, that's a simple way to live, and that feels good. And I think that the internet has really like kind of taken that match and just like struck it and like put some dynamite on a rocket and gone, to the moon with it. And social media on top of the internet made it even worse. And then what happened in the last year, right? Everyone's locked down. You're not seeing your coworkers. You're not seeing a lot of people who have different views from you in a casual setting in which you're not talking about politics, right? So you're no longer, for a lot of people anyway, you're not at work, you're not at family events, you're not with your friends who, aren't demons. They're just like, oh, that's Todd who voted for Biden, right? Like, not Todd, the neo-Marxist liberal fascist, right? But the problem is that we're all locked down in our homes, in our apartments with our family members, our significant others who probably agree with us to the most extent. And so our only connection to the other side now is what we hear from the media, is what we hear from our echo chambers on Facebook, it's what we hear from the people we follow on Twitter. And so we're more and more untethered from the normal day-to-day interactions, often non-political, that just act as gentle reminders that person on the quote-unquote other side isn't evil. They're just a person who wants like a slightly higher or lower tax rate, if we're being honest. But the problem is when all the media we're seeing is the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th or Antifa mobs running through the streets of New York. And then pundits on either side will say the people on January 6th represent 70 million voters who voted for Donald Trump, or the people in the streets of Chicago looting all those stores. That's who Joe Biden wants. Incorrect. They're just your coworkers and family and friends, and I think we're forgetting that.
Yes, and that's a small percentage of those people of either group, but, they're the squeaky wheel and we see them. More with Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. We are talking to Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. And I want to shift back to the podcast specifically, but I want to get your opinion on this first. I think there's a unique difference between conservatives and liberals in that in many cases, the conservatives are former liberals, so they have a better understanding of the liberal mindset. What do you think?
I do think it goes both ways. To your point about conservatives better understanding liberals, that's absolutely true. In that's been proven in studies. Conservatives can paint a more accurate picture of liberals than liberals can of conservatives. And I think some of the reason is that basically every mainstream media source shows liberals the way that they want to be seen. So conservatives are watching mainstream media, they're seeing how liberals want to be seen, and so they can better articulate how liberals see themselves.
That's a great point.
The issue is, that liberals, unless they actively seek it out, I'm not talking about just passively watching NBC or passively watching HBO or Showtime, which anyone can do and get a good understanding of what a liberal is, or any mainstream movie, right? For a liberal to actually understand a conservative on their own terms, they have to actively do the work. And like I said earlier, a lot of people just don't have the time. So a lot of well-meaning people who, if they had the time, or if our media were more diverse, would be able to articulate what a conservative is the way that a conservative sees themselves. So I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with your point that you didn't say all, but that a lot of conservatives are former liberals, because I do think it also goes the other way. You can talk. I have quite a few friends who started out conservative and religious, and then they became liberal. I also know people who went the exact opposite direction, started out liberal and then became conservative. And I do think that what a lot of that is, Charles, is that when you see those switches, which happen, I don't know how common they are, but when you see those switches, I don't actually think it's an articulation of someone running from an ideology. I think it's that they probably just were born and raised into that, and then they started thinking about it and then came to another decision. Now,
Right.
some people are raised conservative and stay conservative once they critically think about it. And some people are raised liberal and stay liberal when they think about it. But oftentimes the things that we're taught as children, or that we even feel really hard students, once that stuff starts kind of hitting the world and we have to really critically think about these topics, that can lead to change. But I'm not necessarily sure that it's kind of endemic on one side or the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm with you. Yeah, that was a good point. So back to the podcast, I want to know how you get such wonderful and interesting guests.
You know, I wish there was a secret sauce, but I got to give it to the kindness of strangers, man. It's really that. It's really me reaching out, sending a message on Twitter or an email, and I kind of message them and I say, hey, this is what I'd love to talk about. This is what your research means to me, and I think people deserve to hear it. What do you think? And I don't hear from everybody, but I hear from a surprising amount of people. And I imagine that when you approach, I mean, like you approached me, and I'm sure like you approach your other guests, like people really enjoy when someone is interested in what they have to say, and when they are offered an audience to share their views in the ways that they want their views to be heard. And I think generally people are pretty generous, which is shocking because time is limited.
Yeah. And I think that's good to hear. I have other people who say, I think I want to start doing this. What are you doing? How do you know this person? I'm like, trust me, you're going to get a lot of people who say no, but you'll be surprised at how many people respond. Just if they're busy responding and saying no, I'm still like, wow, cool. The fact that you responded and said you're too busy, you think they just blow you off. But yeah, I definitely have the same experience. However, this may differ here. Do you find it more difficult to get left-leaning guests than right-leaning guests?
That's a good question.
You know what my answer is, right?
I do know what your answer is. And you know, I will answer your question in a way. So to your actual question, I haven't seeked out yet a large swath of people who are either like their identity is conservative or their identity is liberal in terms of they're a left-wing activist or right-wing activist, let's say. Right. I tend to approach guests really just on whatever the topic is. And if they're left or right, I guess that's less important. When it comes to Will Riley, for instance, and his episode, I did specifically want to hear the right-wing perspective that rejects racial nationalism, because I do think it's important to hear a really robust right-wing version of that. But to your point, I mean, I'll just be honest. Even though I've been trying to do the work inside myself and understand that people on the other side of the aisle, quote unquote, many of them are acting in good faith, there was that part of me, and I'm just confessing this because I think I need to. When you invited me to come on, I did feel a bit of a twinge in my chest, and I asked a couple people if I should do it. And the thing is that was just a response that I had because of decades of training.
That is
you know what
awesome. I mean? And I'm not even right.
Right. No, I know. Yeah. That's exactly right. But I'm thinking like, oh, it's AM radio and da-da-da. And like, I ran through all of these scripts in my head that had just kind of been there. And you know, I'm only saying it because I think many people go through these things, whether it's on the left or the right. You have that thing of like, oh, should I do it? What will it do to my reputation in the show? And blah, 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 blah. And it's like, if I'm going to actually practice what I preach and speak to people who may have an audience that is different from mine, and I'm actually going to try and seek out and reach those people, then I actually have to do it. And I can't like, oh, I don't know, how is it going to affect me? Like, that's the poison in our society right now. And so I'm only articulating that to you because I'm guilty of it. I'm just as human as anybody else, but that's something that I'm trying to work through, and I think people need to work through as well.
That was awesome. You made me laugh out loud. That was awesome. I love the honesty, and you know, it's real, and people need to understand that we all go through that, and that's the first icebreaker, I think. Final segment coming up with Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. We've reached our final segment with Jonathan Torosian, the host of the New Liberals podcast. And Jonathan, if you listen to the show any, you know I like to offer solutions to the problems that we discuss. and we're technically trying to conquer the same problem. So how do you think we improve this growing divide?
That's a great question. And I love that you had I Need a Dollar by Aloe Black as the lead-in song. That dude is great. That dude is great. And everyone needs to listen to more of him. So,
yes.
You know what? To answer your question, Charles, I'm actually going to quote you back to you from the January 24th episode of your show with Lawrence Krauss. Quote, "Whatever your view is on this and any other topic, it's approaching it in a logical way, saying, quote, I think there's a problem and we ought to solve it. There's not a problem. Let's find out who's right, as opposed to, you're an idiot, you're wrong," end quote. And I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think it's really important for me to say that I really enjoy what you're doing with the show, and that's not just to pump you up because you had me on. But I think that when you see people who are trying to bridge the divide without sacrificing or compromising their own views, whatever they may be, that's important. And I thought it was really cool that you had, over the last 2 weeks, people on both sides of the aisle in terms of climate change. And you allowed them to articulate their views in the way that they wanted to articulate them without like straw manning them or asking them leading questions which would make them look stupid, which is oftentimes what we'll hear on mainstream media organizations. So in terms of how to do it, I mean, I think people just need to listen to your show. I think that's a great example of how to do it. And there are left-wing ones as well. I think that Blocked and Reported with Katie Herzog and Jesse Signal is a great one. I think the Fifth Column with Camille Foster and others, is fantastic because they have disagreements with one another, and the guys like each other. There's a commonality of good feeling among them, but they get into it, but it's never personal. And I think those are the conversations I really enjoy listening to and what we need more of.
I appreciate that. And I really, truly just want to get down to the brass tacks. And I think I do a decent job, not tooting my own horn, but I think I would do better if I got more people on the other side. Obviously, as a conservative, even though I don't agree with them all the time, it's easier than get them. Like, there's no way I would get a liberal on the level of Dennis Prager. So I got Dennis Prager, me. I would never get the liberal version of Dennis Prager. Right. So, I keep trying. Some people will come on and I'll get more, but I think it adds more balance to the show. You're going to love this. Since you quoted me back to me, I want you in every show with the same question. Right. And you talk about people coming up with like who they wanted to give empathy to. So I want to know why you asked that question and what your answer would be.
I asked that question because empathy is really important. I think that being able to empathize with someone who has differences from you, and even being able to empathize with people who might be on your side but you just don't think often enough about, is important because our lives are really busy. Like I said, we have a lot of things going on. So it's easy to just get caricatures of people on the news or even caricatures of your own friends and family members. Oh, Tina's a real blah, 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 right? So that's all you think about Tina as. But I think it's important to just take a moment, be still, think about other people, and try and be empathetic to them in the way that you'd want them to be empathetic to you. It's kind of the golden rule. In terms of who I would want to extend empathy to, gosh, this is going to sound cheesy if you haven't been in therapy, but honestly, I just want to try and be empathetic to myself, if I'm being honest. And I think it's really important for people. Like when I mentioned that I kind of like froze up when I got your invitation for at least like an hour, right? I got over it. But I need to also be empathetic to myself that happened, right? And I think that if you have views in the past or you changed your mind, I'm saying this to everybody, be empathetic to yourself about the person that you were rather than judgmental. Because it's okay to change your mind without changing who you are as a person and a human being.
That was phenomenal. You were great. Please come back. He is
Thank you, Charles.
Jonathan Torosian, host of the New Liberals podcast. And that question he asked, he got some great responses. Some of my favorite were Ibram Kendi, Donald Trump, and no one.